Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
An unplanned trip with girlfriends might embarrass your husband? In today's story, we find out. Enjoy the story! My name is Sean Miller. I am 50 years old, and my wife Anna is 49. We met in 1993 on a stretch of I-5 between San Clemente and Camp Pendleton, where I was stationed at the time. I was returning to base after visiting a friend who was attending UCLA. My friend had gotten tickets to a Dodgers game on Saturday night, so I stayed overnight and spent most of Sunday with him before heading back to base in the afternoon. While driving, I saw a taxi on the side of the road with its hood up and steam coming from the radiator. I slowed down and stopped to offer help. The taxi driver said he had already radioed for assistance, thanked me for stopping, and I turned to go back to my rental car. That's when I heard the most angelic voice calling out to me. I turned around and saw the most beautiful young woman I had ever seen standing at the open rear passenger door of the taxi. She was about 5 feet 4 inches, slim but with curves in all the right places. Her piercing blue eyes looked into mine, and her long strawberry blonde hair flowed in the cool Southern California wind. She ran toward me. She smiled as she stood in front of me, her cheeks turning pink as she seemed unsure of herself. Finally, she spoke. Sorry, sir, I was wondering if you could give me a ride back to my college. We have a curfew in our dorm, and I don't want to be late, or I'll get punished. Where are you studying? I asked. San Diego, she answered. Well, I'm heading back to Camp Pendleton, so I'm not going as far as San Diego, but I can at least give you a ride part of the way, I offered. Are you sure you can't take me all the way to San Diego? It's not that far, she pleaded. I saw the despair in her beautiful blue eyes. She pouted, and tears began to well up. How could I refuse? Okay, I'll take you to college, I said. She looked straight into my eyes, and the biggest, most beautiful smile appeared on her lips. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with gratitude, and she won my heart right then and there. On the way to San Diego, we chatted nonstop. She told me she was a sophomore working toward a bachelor's degree in education. I told her I was in my second year in the Marines. By the time I pulled up to her dorm, it felt like we had known each other for years. She beat me to it and was the first to ask for my phone number. I gave her the base number as well as the pager number I had for my unit in case we were called out on a mission since I was in the intelligence unit. She gave me the hotel's phone number. I walked her to the front door of her dorm, and she took my hands in hers, thanking me for the ride. Then she stood on her toes and kissed me on the lips, a long, chaste kiss. After we broke the kiss, she turned and opened the door, saying she would call me soon. 5 years later, at the end of July, we got married in her hometown of Willow Creek, North Carolina. She was happy to have the wedding there since I had left the Marines and taken a government job in Virginia. I had no family. My parents had left me to be raised by my grandparents, and they didn't even return after my grandparents passed. So, only Anna's relatives were at the wedding. We bought a house in Great Falls, Virginia, where Anna got a job as an elementary school teacher with a short commute. Life was great for us, and we were extremely happy. 3 years after we married, we had our first child, Roger. A year later, our daughter Danielle was born, followed by Heather and Aaron, who are twins. Luckily, my job only required travel once a month for a few days, so I was home with my wife and kids more than most fathers. We raised wonderful children and enjoyed every moment of it. Our eldest son, Roger, is engaged to his high school sweetheart and works as a computer programmer. Danielle is studying law and plans to practice family law. Heather is also in college, studying to become a teacher like her mother, and Aaron is studying to become an engineer. With our 25th wedding anniversary approaching, I decided to book us a cruise to the Caribbean. Since Anna works during the summer when she's not teaching, I had to make sure she could take time off before booking the cruise. One night at dinner, I brought it up. Honey, can you ask for 2 weeks off starting the day after our anniversary? I want to book us a Caribbean cruise, I said. Oh, honey, that's so sweet, Anna said with a smile. She fell silent, and the smile disappeared. Sorry, I can't. I've already asked for a week off at the end of June. I'm going to Atlantic City with Veronica, Emily, and Denise. What? Why am I only finding out about this now? I asked, surprised. We booked the trip 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you closer to the trip date. I knew you had a lot going on at work with the new employees you're training, and I didn't want to bother you, my wife explained. But you knew our anniversary was coming up, and you didn't even discuss it with me? I said, trying to understand why our anniversary wasn't that important to her. The girls and I wanted to take a little trip, see a show, play a bit at the casino, go to the beach, walk along the boardwalk, she replied with an edge of annoyance in her voice. Besides, we never do more than go away for a weekend on our anniversary. We might as well just do that now. We only went away for the weekend because of the kids. Now they're adults, we can spend more time celebrating our anniversary, I said, feeling frustrated by her attitude and the lack of thoughtfulness. We have more opportunities now. Well, it can't be helped. You should have thought about this cruise in advance, she exclaimed. In all the 30 years we'd been together, she had never raised her voice to me. This really bothered me. Maybe you should have discussed the Atlantic City trip with me before making a decision, I replied, standing up and clearing my dishes from the table. Anna said nothing as I walked past her into the kitchen. I rinsed the dishes and put them in the dishwasher. I went into my office, opened the drinks cabinet, and poured myself a large glass of Chivas. I stepped out onto the back porch and sat down to think about what had just happened. My wife's behavior at dinner deeply disturbed me. Her reactions were completely uncharacteristic. She always talked to me about her plans when meeting up with her friends. All of this pointed to something unsettling. Was my beloved wife, with whom I've spent almost 25 years, planning to be unfaithful? Or worse, had she already cheated on me? Anna and her friends started throwing bachelorette parties about 5 years ago. They went out every other Friday night for dinner, drinks, and a movie, or to see a local performance. She never came back late on those evenings, always home before midnight, never drunk or in a bad state. She never acted any differently than she did at other times. On Saturdays, I played golf with their husbands, and we all became friends. Neither husband had ever mentioned anything unusual when we played golf. I'll have to ask the guys if they know anything about this trip to Atlantic City when we play golf this weekend, I thought, trying to stay analytical and not jump to conclusions. If she cheated, it must have been after the kids were born, because we did a genealogy test that confirmed they're mine. So, that was a bit reassuring. I had to investigate. Luckily, investigating is my job. My family and friends don't know what I really do, they just know me as a senior data analyst for the government, which is partly true. I am a data analyst, but for the CIA. I'm not allowed to tell anyone what I actually do. Honestly, no one has ever asked questions after hearing data analyst. Everyone just assumed I analyze budgets or something similar. No one ever thought there were other types of data that needed analyzing. My wife never really knew what I did in the Marines either. She thought I was just a regular soldier when, in fact, I was a sniper, tracker, an analyst in an intelligence unit. My unit was one of the few that worked with the CIA on Black Ops, so I was recruited when I left the Marines. It was a no-brainer for me to join the CIA. They wanted to use my analytical and tracking skills more than my sniper abilities, which meant less dangerous field work. They also promised I would mostly work on domestic assignments, which allowed me to be a good father and husband. Perhaps that's why I haven't been a good enough husband. Despite all my training, I never noticed any signs of possible infidelity until now. Maybe I was truly blinded by love and didn't see the warning signs. I finished my drink and went back to the kitchen to wash the glass. I noticed Anna sitting in the living room, grading schoolwork as usual in the evenings. I then returned to my office, put the glass away, and went to our bedroom to change into my pajamas. Tonight, I decided I'd sleep on the sofa in my office. I couldn't shake off the feelings enough to be completely rational around her. I grabbed a change of clothes for tomorrow, a pillow, and headed to my office. I locked the door behind me, unfolded the couch, set the alarm on my phone, and plugged it into charge. Sleep didn't come quickly, especially when Anna went to bed and discovered I wasn't there. She knocked on the office door and screamed about me not sleeping in her bed. I just ignored her. She eventually gave up, and at some point, I fell asleep. 5 a.m. came too early, but luckily, lack of sleep was something I got used to in the Marine Corps, so it was more of an inconvenience than a problem. I used the downstairs bathroom to wash my face and avoided going upstairs so as not to wake my wife. I made myself a regular cup of black tea, skipped breakfast, and headed to work before Anna got up. My usual 20-minute commute took about half the time since I left earlier than usual, but I didn't complain. It gave me more time to prepare for the new investigation. I arrived at work a little before 6:30 a.m., a full hour before anyone else usually showed up. Once I settled into my office and my computer completed its startup procedures, I sent an email to my department head, asking him to let me know when I could have a meeting with him today. I had a serious personal issue that needed to be discussed. After hitting send, I began making a list of everything needed to conduct the investigation. While working on the list, I received a text message from my wife, saying she didn't like the way I acted the night before and that she felt my refusal to sleep with her was disrespectful. I laughed when I read it. A follow-up message said we would discuss this later in the evening. I decided not to respond and went back to my list. Not long after 7:30, my work phone rang. Sean Miller, listening, I answered, already knowing who would be on the other end. Yes, sir. I'll be there in a few minutes. Logging out of the computer should be common practice for anyone leaving the workplace. For us at the CIA, it's mandatory to prevent data theft. I walked out of the office, closed and locked the door, catching the attention of my team sitting in rows of desks positioned so they faced each other but also allowed them to observe one another. It was a team I had personally put together to work efficiently and support each other. Each team member complimented the others in their dedication and commitment to each other, to me, and to the CIA. There was no other team I would rather be in the thick of it with than these men and women. Early at work, boss. Anything important? Asked Mark, the oldest member of my team. That remains to be seen, I replied. I'll be back in a while. Knowing better than to ask further questions, they returned to work. I left our premises and walked down the corridor to the office of James Loring, the head of our division. Opening the door to his office, I was greeted by his secretary, Mary. Good morning, Agent Miller. You may go right in. Good morning, Mary, I replied, walking past her and entering my boss's office. Good morning, Sean. Have a seat, my boss said, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. Good morning, Jim, I replied, sitting down. He closed his laptop, pushed it aside on the table, folded his hands, and rested his chin on them. I'm guessing this isn't going to be a pleasant conversation, Jim said. What's happening? I froze, feeling that if I didn't say anything, it wouldn't become real. And when I did speak, my world would completely collapse. Apparently, my pause was too long because my boss cleared his throat to get my attention. Sorry, Jim. This is complicated for many reasons. I think Anna is cheating on me, or is going to cheat on me, I said. Relaying this information to my boss was almost therapeutic, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I see, the chief said, shaking his head slightly. Tell me everything you know so far. Over the next half hour, I told my boss about the events of the previous night and all my thoughts about how and when something could happen, or if it had already happened. Jim processed the information like any CIA executive would, but he did it in a more friendly manner. I had worked on his team when I first started here, so he knew me as much as I knew him. We had spent a lot of time together on missions, and you could say he was my best friend, though we rarely saw each other outside of work since, in our line of work, it's better that way. Sean, I hope Anna isn't cheating on you, Jim said sincerely. However, this needs to be fully investigated, if only because your wife may be compromised. If, for any reason, a foreign government suspects your real work and tries to use your wife, it could lead to a serious breach of information. I understand. That's why I came to you so early. I need to conduct an investigation. I've already started planning, I said, hoping he would allow me to take the lead. Sean, you know you can't participate in this investigation. It's standard protocol, Jim noted. I felt disappointed. My posture slackened in defeat. The boss clearly noticed. I don't know if that was the real reason for his next decision, and I didn't care. However, he continued, you and your team are the best investigators we have, so I'm making an exception. Don't make me regret it. I won't, Jim. I'll keep you informed every step of the way, Jim. As soon as I know something, you'll know it. I speak with utmost confidence, okay? You have all of our resources at your team's disposal. Hand over all of your team's current assignments to Drake's team, the boss said with an authoritative tone. Got it, I replied and left. It was a little after 8 a.m. when I returned to our team room. All team members stopped and turned their attention to me. I closed the door behind me, went to the coffee pot, poured myself some coffee, added sugar and cream. Turning to face the team, I leaned against the counter, took a sip of my coffee, letting the warmth and caffeine take over me. It was going to be a long few months. Taking another sip, I cleared my throat. Stop work, pack everything up, and organize it for transfer. When everything is ready, hand it over to Drake's team and brief them on the status. Then join me in the office for a briefing on the next mission, I commanded. Yes, boss, the team responded. They quickly got to work, and I went into the office, sat down, and continued to draw up a plan to investigate the possible infidelity of my wife. Working on a plan and making lists helped me stay focused and in a workable state. Pity, contempt, anger, and doubt disappeared. I was completely focused on work and treated it like any other task, detached from family life as always. While working, I lost track of time until a knock on the office door broke me out of my trance. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 11:25 a.m. Come in, I said loudly. The door opened, and the team entered. Sit down and let's begin, I declared. 2 sat on chairs in front of my table, the rest took chairs against the wall and placed them next to each other. All 4 had legal pads and were ready to take notes. What do we have, boss? Mark asked. We have an agent whose wife may be cheating on him or is about to, which could compromise the agent and the company. We are tasked with fully investigating this and determining whether the cheating has occurred, is happening, or is about to happen. We also need to check on everyone involved and see if there's any participation from enemy elements, foreign or domestic, I informed the team. So, who is this poor cuckold whose wife is cheating on him? Mark asked. It's me, I answered without hesitation. I should have been angry about being called a cuckold. I should have been angry about the whole situation. But the last 3 emotionless hours had made me realize that withdrawing from family life and focusing on work was the only way to get through this. Damn. Sorry, boss, Mark apologized. I don't want an apology. I shouted, interrupting him. Don't you dare apologize. Everyone else thought the same thing. It may or may not be true, but it doesn't change the fact that we're tasked with finding out all of this. We're following standard protocol for a situation like this. Mark and Justin, gather everything you need to bug my house, microphones, cameras, everything. Load it into the electric van. You'll both pose as electricians checking faulty switches in case the neighbors get nosy. Bring flash drives to hack and clone my wife's laptop and phone. Sharon and Mike, I have a list of all her friends she goes out with for bachelorette parties. Their husbands are also on the list. Start checking them out. I also have a list of the places they supposedly go for these parties. They go out every other Friday evening, and the last time was last Friday. Check for security cameras in and around these areas, see what you can find. Also, check social media to see if other visitors have taken photos and accidentally captured the subjects and their associates in the background in compromising situations. Check all bank accounts, credit cards, and anything else that might provide information about the target's activities. You know what to look for. The target and her friends all work at the same school, so check for the possibility of romantic connections there. They're planning a trip to Atlantic City the last week of June. Check it out and see what you can find. I'll try to get a rough itinerary from my wife. Mark and Justin, let me know as soon as you're ready so I can leave and be home before you arrive. Once you're done with the house, come back here and prepare to bug the school and conduct reconnaissance there. Plant bugs in all the rooms where the target and her friends teach, as well as in the staff room. Let's get to work, I commanded, and they quickly left the office. I went back to making my list and realized I would need micro cameras and listening devices to have with me. Asking about my wife and her friends would be easier with these devices. I headed to the supply department, where Mark and Justin were gathering their equipment. When I arrived, they simply nodded in acknowledgement and continued collecting. I took a dozen pens, a ring, and a keychain that acted as audio recording devices. I also grabbed a lapel pin and a pair of non-prescription glasses that recorded video. When I finished, I told Mark and Justin that I was heading home and they could come over when they were ready. I arrived home a little before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Mark and Justin arrived in the electric van about 20 minutes later, which gave us plenty of time to bug the house, as my wife was at school until 4 p.m. After Mark and Justin left, I went into the bedroom and changed clothes. We'd have to forget about modesty for the next 3 months, as we had installed cameras and microphones in every room. An hour before my wife arrived, I went to the store to buy ingredients for dinner. After shopping, I immediately returned home and began preparing the obligatory "I screwed up and I'm sorry" dinner for my wife to avoid raising suspicion. The smell of baked swordfish and scallops and a creamy lemon garlic sauce filled the house. I knew I'd made the right choice when the door to the garage slammed, but the door to the veranda did not. The aroma of her favorite dish was enough to calm the raging beast. The question was whether it would be enough to keep her calm. I was surprised to see her walk into the kitchen with a smile on her face. She came up to me, hugged me, and kissed me. "You're making my favorite dish," she whispered in my ear. I hugged her and pulled her back slightly, keeping my hands on her shoulders. "Sorry for snapping at you last night, darling. I got angry because I wanted to do something special for you on our anniversary. I didn't realize you'd already made plans to use your free time." "It's okay, honey. I was confused too, and I should have told you about the trip to Atlantic City sooner." "So, I'm also partly to blame for last night," Anna replied with a sparkle in her eyes and a grin that suggested I might get lucky tonight. Normally, I'd be excited about the prospect of having a night with my wife, but now I wasn't sure if I could handle it, knowing she might not be faithful. I'd have to put on a show, but I wasn't sure I could pull it off. I'd never had any problems before, but if I had them now, she might suspect something was wrong. "Dinner will be ready in half an hour. Why don't you go upstairs and change into something more comfortable? Your feet must hurt from standing on those hard school floors all day," I suggested. "Oh yeah, great idea. My legs do hurt a little," my wife agreed, quickly kissing me before heading upstairs. I grabbed my phone and called Mark. "I need you to get me some Viagra and bring it to my house as soon as possible. Meet me at the front door of the garage, and I'll come out to meet you when I get the chance," I instructed my senior team member. I hung up the phone, thinking that tomorrow morning there would definitely be some talk about the coffee maker in the office. At this point, I had no choice. I needed chemical help to get through tonight. We'd always had a healthy, intimate life, down to 2 or 3 times a week now, but still regular after all these years. About half an hour later, we sat down to dinner, and I served my wife a nice Merlot to go with her meal. I, not being a wine drinker, had water with lemon, not wanting to mix alcohol with Viagra. Fortunately, Anna wasn't focused on what I was drinking and didn't question it. Instead, she talked about her day at school and the funny things her students did. We discussed normal things, like what projects needed to be done around the house and how we'd need to stock up on food when the twins came home for summer break. After we finished eating, I began clearing the table. As I leaned over my wife to grab her plate, she wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "Would you like to join me upstairs?" How could I refuse such a wonderful invitation from a gorgeous young lady? I whispered back, making her giggle like a schoolgirl. "Let me clean up quickly, and I'll be up in a minute." I kissed her. After taking her plate, she stood up and walked out of the dining room, adding an extra sway to her hips. At 49 years old, she still had an impressively firm figure. Once I was sure she was upstairs in the bedroom, I rushed to the garage quietly. Mark was waiting and quickly handed me the package I'd asked for. I returned to the kitchen, finished cleaning, and started the dishwasher. I then hid the box in a fake book on the bookshelf and went upstairs to our bedroom. We had passionate intimacy several times. Afterward, I went to the shower, cleaned up, and carefully took her phone. I went downstairs, grabbed her school laptop from her bag, and returned to the office. As I sat down in the leather chair, I realized I was still without anything. Well, no time to think about that now. I turned on her laptop and connected the flash drive to crack the password. While that was running, I connected her phone to my work phone and started cloning the data. I had copied the data. I took a couple of writing pens, putting one in her bag and the other in her school tool bag. Upon returning to the office, I saw that the laptop and phone had been hacked and cloned. After replacing the flash drive with another one, I installed spyware that couldn't be detected by any antivirus. Now, whenever the laptop connects to the internet, all new data will be sent to the cloud for our access. While the flash drive was working, I downloaded a ghost application onto my phone, which embedded itself into frequently used apps, becoming invisible. This application worked like spyware installed on the laptop. In a few minutes, everything was ready. I put the flash drive containing the laptop's data and the clone phone in my suitcase. After returning the laptop to my school bag, I went into the bedroom and plugged my phone into the charger. Then I turned off the light, walked to my side of the bed, opened the covers, and sat down. Turning off the nightlight, I lay down and fell asleep. The 5 a.m. alarm woke me up. I reached out to turn it off, and my wife hugged me tightly, holding on as if I were a life preserver. Carefully, I began to free myself from her embrace. Finally free, I headed to the bathroom. My routine kicked in on autopilot, and my seamanship training took over. After 15 minutes, I was ready, shaved, used the toilet, showered, and clean. By 5:30 a.m., I was dressed. My suitcase was on the kitchen table, and I had already put water on for tea and turned on the coffee maker so the coffee would be ready when Anna woke up. After last night, I decided to make a hearty breakfast. Grabbing everything I needed from the fridge and pantry, I started making country omelets, toast, and chopped fruit. Just as I finished setting out breakfast, my wife limped into the kitchen, looking a little worse for wear, like a cowboy after a long ride. "Sit down, I'll get you some coffee," I suggested to Anna. She said nothing, just walked to her seat and sat down. I brought her coffee and a glass of orange juice, placing them beside her breakfast. She kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks for cleaning up after me last night," she said as I straightened up. "You really wore me out." "I was on a roll yesterday," I chuckled. "Thanks for breakfast this morning," she added. "You're welcome," I replied, sitting down to eat. We both ate in relative silence, which was typical for us since we were still waking up. After I finished eating, I started cleaning up and loading the dishwasher. Anna came up with her dishes and handed them to me. "It's Friday. Do you want to eat out?" Anna asked. "Will you be able to?" "You're walking a little stiff this morning, people might start talking," I replied, grinning. "I don't really care what strangers think." "I'm more worried about what the school will say about me," she said, looking somewhat concerned. "Well, I'm sure the girls will want to know the details over lunch," I teased. Then she pulled my face to hers and kissed me. "I'm going to take a shower. See you tonight. Have a nice day at work. Love you." She kissed me again and started upstairs. "Have a nice day at work, too," I called after her as she ascended the stairs. I don't think she even noticed I didn't say I love you back. After finishing loading the dishwasher, I grabbed my briefcase and phone and headed to the garage. Sitting behind the wheel of my car, I let out a sigh of relief, realizing I had managed to navigate another interaction with my wife without giving anything away. The drive to work was the same as usual: morning traffic, cars packed next to each other, horns honking, middle fingers raised, a typical trip through the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I always felt relieved when I pulled into the parking lot at work, ready to switch into work mode and leave everything else behind. Walking into our team's office, I wasn't surprised to see everyone gathered around the coffee machine. The conversation stopped when I entered. Closing the door behind me, I knew they had probably all stayed up late, watching videos of my wife and me from the night before. "Get it all out now," I suggested, noticing their impatient stares. "Well, it's not that easy, boss," Mark chuckled. "Looks like you had a rough night, boss," Justin added, trying not to laugh. "She said so," Mike blurted out, making everyone laugh. I almost laughed too, but then I looked at Sharon, the only one who hadn't said anything. "Well, boss, after what I saw, if things don't work out with your wife, I'm available," Sharon said, looking me straight in the eye, dead serious. I even felt flattered because Sharon was attractive. "Is everyone finished?" I asked. Everyone looked around and fell silent. "Now that you've got that out of your system, report to my office in 10 minutes, I said, walking into my office and closing the door. Sitting down at my desk, I pulled out the flash drive containing the copied data from Anna's laptop and the clone phone from my briefcase. I almost laughed. If it had been anyone else, I would have joined in the laughter. This comment from Sharon was completely unexpected and perhaps something worth considering. I took a few minutes to collect my thoughts while my computer booted up. A few minutes later, my team walked into my office. Sharon walked over to the 72-inch screen on the wall and turned it on so the team could stream information from their tablets for everyone to see. "Mark, what do you have?" I asked. Justin and I snuck into the school late at night. It was pretty easy. Someone should be told that their security is terrible. In general, we looked around but did not find anything important. We also installed audio and video surveillance in all places where your wife and her friends will be, Mark answered. We've also installed equipment in a few other places that might be of interest, just in case. Justin and I checked the backgrounds of all school employees, as well as their social networks, and did not find anything suspicious. After this, we will go to the houses of your wife's friends and install audio recordings, he added. Very good. Mike, I think Sharon should submit her data first, Mike replied. Okay, Sharon, I have looked into the financial details of your wife and her 3 friends. About 4.5 years ago, all 4 opened bank accounts at different banks separate from their spouses. They also opened P.O. boxes at that time, Sharon said. It didn't look good. I also checked their social media. Everything is clean except for the bank accounts and P.O. boxes. Anything else? I asked. Not yet, boss, Sharon replied. Okay, Mike, it's your turn. I found almost nothing in the places on the list you gave us. They visit some of them from time to time, but not often, and when they go, nothing suspicious happens there, Mike noted. After Sharon looked into their financial data, I was able to find out where they go most often. They didn't go too far, they mostly stuck with the Hilton Garden Inn and Falls Church. There are many restaurants and bars in the area within walking distance of the hotel, which also has a bar. Security camera footage of these places shows that they arrived, then went to the toilet to change clothes. After this, they waited in the bar or at tables until men approached them. When each of them found a man, they went to the hotel. Mike nodded to Sharon, and she started talking again. They appeared to be saving money. Only one of them would rent a room for the night, and the others would join her once the room was booked. They also took turns paying for the room. According to the hotel, the rooms they always rented had 2 double beds, so it looks like they were sharing them. Mike added, the men usually left after a few hours, and the girls an hour after them. The girls also changed into the clothes they came in and went home the next morning. The person who rented the room returned to the hotel and handed over the key. Sharon and I will continue to review surveillance footage and identify the men they are dating, run them through our databases, and conduct background checks, Sharon said. At the moment, it doesn't look like they have any regular partners that they're dating, but we haven't seen much of the footage yet. Fine, everyone keep up the good work for the rest of the day, I commented. Then take the weekend and let the computers do what they need to do. I have a golf game planned with the girls' husbands tomorrow morning. I'll see what they know. If I receive anything important, I will contact you. Everybody's free. The team left my office, and I thought about all the information I had just received about my wife's infidelity. This all started shortly after the bachelor party, and they were all in it together. A secret bank account makes sense too. My wife's summer job is in a retail store where she is paid on commission, so when the amount of money she deposited into the account decreased, I was told that things were not going so well. I'll have to do some digging over dinner tonight and see if I can get more information about the trip to Atlantic City. I also have a weekly golf game planned with my husband tomorrow morning. I'll ask what they know about the trip. The weekly round of golf also gave the girls a chance to turn in their hotel room keys without attracting the attention of their husbands. They thought this through so well. I can't help but wonder who the brains behind this operation are. I'm also sure that the guys will be very interested to know that their wives cheat too. I will keep this information to myself until I am ready to reveal it. My day continued as usual. After I accepted the facts as they were, I compartmentalized my wife's infidelity and moved on. I told my boss what we had found so far and promised to keep him updated on any further developments. He said that although he believed there was no interference from other countries or criminal organizations, I should continue the investigation until I was satisfied both personally and professionally. I appreciated that he gave me the leeway to continue the investigation, even if it was mostly for personal reasons. At this point, I was sure he took into account that Virginia is a fault-based divorce state, so the more evidence I had of infidelity, the better the outcome for me in the divorce. Soon, it was time to go home and meet my lying, cheating wife for dinner. When I entered our house from the transition, I realized that I no longer loved her. I didn't care at all whether I found out why she cheated on me or not. I just wanted to leave the marriage with the best possible outcome for myself. Until then, all I had to do was continue to act like the loving husband I was until 3 days ago. "Darling, I'm home," I shouted, closing the door behind me. "I'm almost done getting ready," Anna shouted back from upstairs. I went into my office, put my briefcase on the table, and picked up one of the audio recording pens. After putting the pen in my chest pocket, I quickly walked up the stairs to our bedroom to freshen up in the bathroom. My wife was sitting at her dressing table, putting on her makeup. She didn't really need it. I told her that all the time, but she wore it anyway. I decided that I would enjoy this situation. She wore a beautiful light blue dress. The dress was not long but not short either, and the position she was sitting in revealed a lot of thigh. I walked up to her, leaned over, and ran my hand up the inside of her thigh. She flinched from the unexpected touch. "Please, can we wait until later? Besides, I'm still quite sick and tender from last night," she said. "We have a reservation in 40 minutes. We have to go," I ordered. I sighed with relief and went to the bathroom. As we drove to Sweetwater Tavern, one of our favorite restaurants, I started teasing my wife again and put my hand on her thigh. She shuddered slightly but said nothing. Then I began caressing her thigh, and after a few moments, she put her left hand on mine. She squeezed it lightly and left her hand resting there while I continued to caress her. When I parked in the Sweetwater lot, it was pretty full, and I had to park almost at the very end. I checked the time on the console clock. It was 6:51 p.m., so we still had a few minutes left before our 7 p.m. reservation. I opened the door for my wife and helped her out, then walked her into the restaurant. We only waited a minute or two before we were shown to our table. "I hope you're happy with the booth," the hostess said, offering us a booth at the end of the row along the far wall. "Perfect," I replied. I helped Anna into the booth and then joined her on the same side instead of taking the seat opposite her. My wife pressed her shoulder against me and took my arm. The hostess smiled and placed the menu on the table in front of us, then said that the waiter would be coming shortly. We were studying the menu and deciding what to order for dinner when the waiter brought ice water. He asked if we were ready to order, and we requested a few more minutes to decide. He removed the extra cutlery and said he would be back in a few minutes to take our order. As promised, the waiter returned after about 5 minutes. My wife ordered the grilled chicken breast with fried green beans and mushrooms on thin noodles with brown butter, along with a glass of Bordeaux wine. I ordered a drunken ribeye marinated in light beer with sautéed mushrooms and mashed potatoes. Still preferring not to drink alcohol since I was driving, I ordered sweet tea. While we waited for the food, I put my hand on my wife's thigh again. She did not flinch. Instead, she hugged my right arm and laid her head on my shoulder. I took this as a sign of satisfaction and lightly caressed the inside of her thigh, feeling no resistance. I decided that now would be a good time to find out something about her trip to Atlantic City. "Honey," I said, loud enough for her to hear me over the other customers' conversations and the soft music, "I was wondering if you and the girls had plans for a trip to Atlantic City yet." "Why do you ask?" she replied, seeming unconcerned. "I was just wondering if I might want to send you and the girls flowers or wine for one of the nights," I replied. "Oh, that's so sweet of you," she exclaimed, squeezing my hand tightly. "Emily has all the details and has booked a hotel room for us. I'll make sure you get the plan before we leave." "That would be great," I said. "Maybe I can convince the guys to chip in some money tomorrow so we can get you some expensive champagne." "You're so caring," Anna answered, kissing me on the cheek. Deciding not to press the issue after learning that Emily had booked the hotel, I knew where to start looking in Atlantic City. Now, back to my pleasure. Her soft, innocent sounds were barely audible as her head rested on my shoulder. My idea was to create such a strong desire and need for me over the next 3 months that she would want me more than anything in the world. I knew that she was completely committed to her deception at that moment and would not give up on what was planned in Atlantic City. So, I wanted to create such a strong desire and need for me over the next 3 months that she would simply be devastated when I announced that we were getting a divorce. I looked around at the other booths. Most people were too engrossed in their conversations and meals to notice what was happening in our booth. Sitting diagonally from us was a young man who was looking directly at us with a smirk on his face. I smiled and nodded slightly, and he nodded back. I looked up and saw our waiter approach our table with our dishes. Anna began to come to her senses. She looked into my eyes. It was so wrong, but it felt so good. She pulled my face toward hers and kissed me. None of us could finish our dinner. The portions here were very generous. Although I no longer loved her, it seemed that I still desired her. At 49, she was still stunningly beautiful. The waiter returned a few minutes later with our leftovers and my card. After I left a tip and signed the check, I walked out of the booth and stood up. No sooner had we left the restaurant and breathed in the fresh spring night air. I almost dropped the bag of food when we got to the car. I was incredibly horny and just had to have my wife. Placing the bag of leftovers on the ground, we had a night like teenagers trying to make it before curfew. I started the car and drove toward the exit from the parking lot. As soon as we pulled out onto the street and began driving, I looked at my wife. The light from the street lamps showed me that her skin was glowing. I also noticed that her dress was still gathered around her waist, her breasts on display, bouncing along with the bumps in the road. I focused on the road, and soon we hit a red light. I looked at my wife's face, and she was smiling at me. "Thank you," was all she said. I thought she was still in shock but was slowly coming out of it. The light changed to green, and I started driving again. When we got home, I opened the doors to the passage in the house, then carried Anna upstairs to our bedroom, laying her on our bed. I undressed her and cleaned her up again for the second time that night. After making sure she was covered, I went down to the garage and took the bag of leftover food from the back seat, along with her panties, which I put in my coat pocket. I placed the bag of leftover food on the workbench and began cleaning the car and then the passenger seat. After about half an hour, I finished before heading back to the house. I put my golf clubs in the trunk of the car, returned to the house, put the leftover food in the refrigerator, and then went up to our bedroom to place Anna's panties in the laundry basket. I undressed, washed my suit and trousers, and hung them up to take to the dry cleaner. Then I washed my wife's dress and put it in the laundry basket. After quickly taking a shower, I went to bed. The next morning, I got up and got ready to play golf with the guys while our wives prepared breakfast. Anna got up soon after and was in the shower when I was almost ready to leave, so I went into the bathroom and opened the shower door a little to reach in and pinch her butt. She shuddered and squeaked. "Honey, I'm going to the golf course," I said. "Okay, honey, have a good game," she answered. I always found golf boring. The only reason I played was to maintain the status quo in our friend group. By playing with them, I was fulfilling a kind of duty. I played pretty well, but it wasn't exciting. The only part one really loved was the 19th hole when you could have a couple of beers. I asked the guys about the trip to Atlantic City. They said they found out about it a few weeks ago and agreed that it was a shame how I found out. Frank suggested that we go to the casino and gamble for a week while the wives were away. I wondered if he was going to cheat on Denise and use the three of us as a cover for his escapades. I told them I thought it was time for a solo trek in the Appalachians. Everyone agreed that it sounded like something a retired Marine would do. Tony and Dave told Frank that a week-long gambling trip was too expensive for them. They eventually agreed to get together for drinks and maybe dinner one night while their wives were away. The rest of the weekend went pretty smoothly. When I arrived at the office on Monday morning, the team was already there and hard at work. I told Sharon to check Emily's finances to find out what hotel and room they would be staying in, as well as any other information that could be obtained. The first thing I did once I settled into my desk was make an appointment with the company's divorce attorney. Yes, the CIA has a full-time divorce lawyer. You wouldn't believe how common divorces are among agents, and this man was good at protecting the company as well as its agents. I then began organizing surveillance for the upcoming girls' night out on Friday. It would be almost impossible to obtain a video image without knowing in advance the room number they would be in. This was unlikely, but I left this option for later in the investigation. For now, we were content with audio surveillance in the rooms and visual monitoring outside. At lunchtime, I called my oldest daughter, Danielle. I told her that since her mother and I's 25th wedding anniversary was approaching, it would be nice to have a big party. Danielle agreed, and we outlined a plan to get started. She said she would involve her siblings in this, and we would continue planning during lunch breaks so as not to raise their mother's suspicions. The next 2 months passed as expected, and nothing of national security concern emerged from our investigation, which was a small relief. Anna and her friends continued to behave as they always had, and I maintained the status quo, but I still had an intimate pleasure with my wife. I think she was starting to enjoy being an exhibitionist. Her only wish after that night at the tavern was that we travel a little further from the city to reduce the chances of getting caught at work. With the warming weather, our opportunities expanded. It got to the point where Anna was begging me to take her out 3 or 4 times a week so we could have an intim in public. Most times we didn't get caught, but we had a lot of close calls, and a few times we definitely had spectators. My wife had become insatiable. Finally, Friday morning arrived when they were supposed to go to Atlantic City. I was packing the car for my solo camping trip, and my wife still hadn't given me a schedule for her week-long trip. Apparently, she didn't want me to know the details. The girls pulled up in Veronica's SUV as I was finishing packing my car. I helped Anna with her bags, carrying them to the SUV and putting them in the trunk. Closing the trunk, I kissed my wife goodbye. "Have a great time, honey." "Enjoy the show," I said as she got into the car. "I will, honey. See you in 9 days." "Good luck on your hike, and be careful," Anna replied. I then leaned over to the driver's window and said to Veronica, Denise, and Emily, "Have fun, girls, and keep my beautiful wife out of trouble." The girls giggled and said they would. After they pulled out of the driveway and drove away, I went back into the house to make sure everything was turned off. After checking everything, I decided to use the bathroom before leaving. After some relief, I went to the sink to wash my hands. While I was washing, I noticed an interesting find on the countertop. Next to the porcelain toothbrush holder were my wife's birth control pills. I couldn't help but wonder if this was intentional or an accidental oversight. I leaned towards it being an accident, as I didn't think she would deliberately risk revealing her infidelity by getting pregnant on purpose. After turning on the camera on my phone, I went to settings and turned on the time and date stamp. I then snapped a photo of the birth control pills on the countertop, satisfied with the proof my apparently distracted wife had left behind. Then I locked up our house and went to work. Mike was waiting for me in the parking lot. Mark, Justin, and Sharon were already in Atlantic City and were probably preparing to bug the girls' room. I took my bag with the necessary items and threw it into the van we were going to drive. We then moved out and were on our way to further destroying my marriage. We arrived at the same hotel as the girls, Ocean Casino Resort. They had chosen their place well, many bars, nightclubs, restaurants, and casinos. We booked 4 rooms, one of which was our command center. Sharon had her own room while Mark, Justin, and Mike shared one. They insisted that I have my own room because they were sure I would need some time alone to relax. I reluctantly agreed, only because they were probably right. My team had already developed observation and sleep shifts. I was there mainly as an observer and an aggrieved husband. I wasn't needed there for other purposes. I stepped out of the van after receiving some cosmetic changes to my face, a slightly larger nose, a mustache, a wig, and colored contact lenses. I also wore a different outfit. I had clothes for the entire week to support my fake personality. Mike and I grabbed our bags and headed to the room that functioned as our command center. Mark opened the door and let us in. He then sat down at a table with several monitors showing different angles of the girls' room and their bathroom. There were also cameras covering the hallway outside their room in both directions, as well as cameras in the main lobby showing all the entrances and exits. From the monitors, I realized that the girls were lying on 2 beds and seemed to be sleeping. "Mark, report," I asked, sitting down on the edge of one of the beds in our command center. They arrived about an hour ago and decided to get some sleep before heading out tonight, Mark replied, glancing at his watch. They plan to get up in about 5 hours to get ready. Sharon sleeps in her room, and Justin sleeps in ours. Any information about their plans for the evening? I asked. Dinner at one of the restaurants here at the hotel and then going to one of the bars to find guys, Mark said. I looked at my watch. It was 5 p.m., which meant it was about 7 in the evening. They would probably have a late dinner around 8 and then head to the bar to find partners for the night. I was a little tired after the 4-hour drive, and if they were planning on staying out late, I needed to rest, too. Okay, I'll go to my room to get some sleep. Call me when they get up. Mike, you should get some rest too. Mark, call Sharon, Justin, and Mike when the girls get up. Once they arrive, tell them everything and then rest yourself, I instructed. Got it, boss, Mark answered. He then stood up and opened a suitcase on one of the beds. He took out a small box and handed it to me. Here's your earphone and microphone. I also sent you an email to a secure address. It contains a link to the command center server so you can view the recordings on your laptop at any time. Thanks, Mark, I replied, then walked out, heading to my room. It seemed like my head had just touched the pillow when the phone rang. Mark called and said that the girls had just gotten up and were getting ready. I dragged myself out of bed, used the bathroom, and reapplied my disguise, now with the untested video glasses. I got dressed, inserted an earpiece, and asked for an audio and video check. After receiving confirmation, I headed down to the lobby and found a spot where I could see the elevators. I pulled out my phone and pretended I was playing a game, which added to the illusion that I was just wearing an earpiece. These days, almost everyone has headphones for listening to music and other things, so they don't attract as much attention as they used to. After a while, I heard Sharon's voice in the earpiece saying that the girls had just left their room and were heading to the elevators. Sure enough, a few minutes later, 4 of them emerged from the elevator, dressed to the nines. It was obvious that they had swapped clothes at some point after picking up Anna since she didn't bring such pretty evening wear with her. I followed them with my eyes to the restaurant they had chosen for dinner. While they were waiting for a table, I stood up and slowly walked toward them. In my earpiece, I heard Justin say he was joining me for dinner, so I made a reservation for 2. After the girls were seated, Justin soon joined me, and we ordered a quick and easy dinner so we could finish before the girls. Since we wouldn't have audio recordings of their conversations outside the room, it was important to have at least 2 people keeping an eye on them. If 1 or 2 of them separated from the rest, one of us could stay, and the other would follow. Dinner went off without incident. The girls paid the bill and then went to the women's room, from where they returned 10 minutes later and headed to one of the bars. The girls found a table next to the small dance floor. Justin and I split up, following them inside. I sat at the bar at the far end with a good view of the girls' table and the dance floor. Justin found a small table between the dance floor and the restrooms. I preferred to sit at the far end of the bar, as people tend to leave one person alone, especially if they seem depressed. There were 2 bartenders working at the bar. The one on my side was a pretty red-haired girl in her 30s. She reminded me of a young Tony Khan. "What should I pour you?" she asked. "Just a lime tonic, please," I replied. The bartender made me a lime tonic and placed it in front of me. "Driving today?" she asked. "Yeah, something like that," I muttered. "Drinks are on the house," she smiled. "Thank you," I said, nodding in gratitude. For the next 3 hours, I watched my wife and her friends dance and flirt with almost every man who walked past their table. To their credit, they drank in moderation while searching for partners. They were ready for the rough dance moves their partners were using. I think my wife was touched more that night than she had been touched by me in the early months of our marriage. It didn't seem like they had any particular type of man they were looking for, other than that they all checked what men had between their legs when they danced. I guess I'll find out later if they're not all plus-size lovers when I check the records from their room. By 1 o'clock in the morning, the bar began to quiet down, and the girls had apparently decided on their partners for the night. For the next hour, they sat at their table talking, drinking, and being affectionate towards each other. The nice bartender brought me another lime tonic. I think it was my 5th or 6th of the evening. As things quieted down at the bar, she gravitated more and more towards me, cleaning up around me. We chatted about small things, almost the standard topics they teach in bartending schools to keep the customer engaged enough to feel listened to and hopefully leave a generous tip. It was about 1 a.m. when the girls took their chosen partners and left the bar. Justin followed them to make sure they stayed at the hotel and didn't go somewhere else. If they stayed at the hotel, it would have made things easier for us, but we were ready to follow them wherever they went. I stayed because I didn't want to watch the celebrations at all. After finishing my work for the night, I completely relaxed, slumped in my chair, and sighed. Apparently, my sigh was too loud and attracted the attention of the red-haired bartender. "You weren't the designated driver, were you?" she asked. "It's so obvious, right?" "Don't worry, I'll pay for the drinks," I offered. "No, drinks are on the house, and yes, it's pretty obvious you're the only customer now," she said. I laughed. "I think that's really obvious." "So, honey, what's your story?" she asked. "Well, to be honest, I was spying on my wife and her friends," I replied, not seeing the harm in partial honesty, especially when no one else was around. The bartender didn't seem surprised. "This probably happens here every week." I started to feel uncomfortable in my suit. I took off my wig and then my mustache. She stood there without the slightest sign of shock on her face until I removed my prosthetic nose. I put the wig, mustache, and nose in the pockets of my sports jacket and felt much better. "It must be pretty serious for an outfit like that," she commented. "Yes, my wife is cheating on me," I replied. "Those 4 women who left a few minutes ago with the men, that's them. They're going upstairs to start a party." "Oh my God," she exclaimed, putting her hand on mine. "I can only imagine how hard this is for you. What are you going to do?" "Well, I never thought she would betray me. I certainly wasn't prepared for how that would turn out," I remarked. "I've already started the divorce process. I just need more solid evidence for it." "Do you want to talk about it?" "It might ease your mind," she asked. When she said this, I looked into her eyes. I hadn't noticed her cool emerald eyes before. They were captivating, and most importantly, there was complete sincerity in her gaze. "I wouldn't want to bother you," I muttered. She squeezed my hand. "Honey, I still have 40 minutes before closing, and I've already cleaned everything up. It's okay for me to listen to you if you want to vent. My name is Michelle, but you can call me Shelly if you want." "Thank you, Shelly." "My name is Sean," I replied. I don't know why, but I found it very comforting. So for the next 30 minutes, I told her everything, excluding, of course, any information about my work for the CIA. I mentioned that I had hired a private investigator and that I was here this week with him to observe what my wife and her friends were doing. "Now I'm afraid to go back to my room and watch the video the detective is taking," I commented to Shelly. "If you want, I can come with you and watch this video so you don't have to go through this alone," Shelly offered. I stuttered, speechless. "Boss," I hear Sharon's voice in the earpiece. "Hey, boss, she's really interested in you. She hasn't broken eye contact with you since you started telling her about Anna's cheating, and she hasn't removed her hand from yours either." I'm completely confused. "I already ran her through the databases, boss. She's divorced 3 years ago. Her husband cheated on her and got her best friend pregnant," Sharon said into the earpiece. "She's been through this before. Take her up on her offer." "It's okay," Shelly said with a hint of disappointment in her beautiful emerald eyes. "I understand." She started to pull away. "No!" I gasped. Shelly stopped and looked me in the eyes again. "I really appreciate your offer," I managed to say, rewarded with a big, beautiful smile. "Okay then, give me a few minutes to close up," she said. I stood up, reached into my inner pocket, and took out my wallet. I pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to Shelly. "For your excellent service today and for keeping me refreshed with tonic all night," I smiled. "I'll be waiting for you in the lobby." "Thank you." "I'll be right out," Shelly said, putting the $20 in her pocket. I walked into the lobby and leaned against the wall next to the bar. "Good decision, boss," I heard Sharon's voice. "Thanks for the support, guys," I said quietly, so as not to attract attention. "You're welcome, boss," everyone answered. A few minutes later, Shelley appeared, lowered the security grill onto the bar, and locked it. I extended my hand to her, she took mine, and we went to my room. Along the way, we exchanged facts about our lives. Finally, we reached my room and went inside. I vacated the bed so we would have a place to sit while we watched an intimate tape in my wife's room. I took off my jacket, camera glasses, and earpiece. Once I was sure I had turned them off, I opened the colored lens case, took the lenses out of my eyes, and put them back in the container. I turned to Shelley, and her mouth was open. "You have the most stunning blue eyes I've ever seen," she exclaimed. "I could say the same about your green eyes," I said, and we both blushed. I walked over to the mini fridge and offered Shelley a drink. She asked for a beer, and I took one for myself. Then I turned on the TV and set up my laptop. I used a VPN to secure the connection, then projected it onto a big screen. I opened my mail and saw a new letter from Mark, looking like it was from a private investigator. "My team is truly the best." The link took me straight to the video, so I didn't have to log into our server and risk exposing my status as a CIA agent. I hesitated before starting the video. Shelley grabbed my hand. "It's okay, we can talk a little more until you're ready," she said. "Thank you," I replied, squeezing her hand lightly. We talked for a while. I don't know how much time passed, but Shelley already felt like my best friend. Finally, I decided it was time to find out what my wife and her friends were doing. "I think I'm ready," I told Shelley. She squeezed my hand tightly and smiled. "I'm here for you. Don't be afraid to stop if you need to." I smiled back at her and focused my attention on the TV, holding the mouse in my right hand. I pressed the play button for the video. The recording began as soon as they entered the hotel room, the girls giggling as they led their partners and sat them on the edge of the two beds. "Which one is your wife?" Shelley asked. "The one in the purple dress," I answered. "Wow, she's beautiful," Shelley exclaimed. I decided not to respond to her comment. I didn't feel anything for my wife anymore. She really was beautiful, but that didn't seem like an appropriate confession to Shelley. Maybe it was because I was attracted to her and didn't want to hurt her. The girls put on a real show. It was obvious that my wife had a lot of practice. Their gentlemen were very persistent, groping the girls while they took off their clothes. They swapped partners as they undressed, something I knew they were doing thanks to audio recordings of their regular meetings at home. However, I never imagined my wife would be involved in something like this, until now. When the girls finished undressing, they began to dismantle the men, trying to undress them as quickly as possible. The show on the screen continued, and Shelley and I watched as Anna and her friends had a night with the men they had picked up at the bar. At that time, I noticed that Shelley squeezed my hand tighter. Turning my head slightly to look at our hands lying on the bed between us. I returned my attention to the TV but continued to watch Shelley out of the corner of my eye. I didn't even realize that she had let go of my hand. I turned to Shelley, and she was looking at me. She had a smile on her face as she looked at me. I'm pretty sure I had a blank expression. There was desire and love in her eyes. Could she fall in love with me so quickly? Of course she could, because I think I also fell in love with her during this same time. Several moments passed as we looked into each other's eyes, a reality I no longer wanted to return to. I paused the video and returned my full attention to Shelley. I was happy when she began to kiss me back. Our lips parted, and our tongues began an erotic dance. It had never felt like this. Is this the kind of passion that can only be experienced by lovers betrayed by those we consider the love of our lives? I may never know for sure, but one thing I do know is that I love this woman who only knew that we were both betrayed. Over the past couple of hours, we had shared our life stories and bonded through our suffering. She told me that life would go on after the divorce, that things would get better, and now she was showing me that when one love dies, another is born. Shelley's hands moved to the top of my chest, and she hurriedly unbuttoned my shirt as we continued to kiss with the same passion. It was the best intimate in my life. It was wonderful, I whispered in her ear. We made love for the next 15 minutes, looking into each other's eyes and locking our lips together. It was amazing, Shelley declared. It certainly was, I agreed. We made love again. Climbing under the blankets, we clung to each other. I was the big spoon, and she was the little spoon, holding each other in a loving embrace. "I love you," Shelley whispered to me. "I love you too," I whispered back. Shelley turned her head and up her body just enough so we could kiss. We settled more comfortably, our bodies now united and whole. After a few minutes, we fell fast asleep. The rest of the week seemed to fly by in a blur. Anna and the girls spent their nights alternating between the hotel's bars and nightclubs, sleeping most of the day. Every night, they gained new fans. Tuesday night was a real treat for them. They ended up meeting a large group of black men, about 10, and returned to my room. After that first night, I never bothered to look at any more footage. I left it all up to my team. After the girls took their men to their room, I met with Shelley. We spent as much time together as we could during the 7 full days I spent in Atlantic City. We made love every day and also went for walks quite often. Shelley took me sightseeing to nice places rather than the standard tourist traps. I was sad to leave, knowing that Shell and I wouldn't be able to see each other as often, but I had a few weekend training workshops scheduled over the next 3 weekends. It just so happened that the training involved spending time with a new love of my life in Atlantic City. My upcoming plans had to change a little, but in a good way. I cut my wife off from night by using the "I'm too tired" card, which was easy to pull off since I spent long days at work playing out the ploy. Anna believed this, and at first glance, everything seemed fine in the Miller household. The surveillance continued over the next 2 girls' nights out. The last party on the eve of our 25th anniversary was supposed to be an interesting one for the team. They needed to carry out the final secret plan. About 2 weeks before the anniversary party, I met Frank, Tony, and Dave one evening for drinks. I showed them evidence of their wives cheating. They didn't take the news very well and were a little angry that I hadn't told them sooner. I apologized and made them promise not to tell their wives until I exposed mine. They readily agreed as soon as I promised to introduce them to my lawyer for free. On Friday, the day before our anniversary party and bridal shower, I paid for Anna, Danielle, and Heather to spend their mother-daughter day at the spa. They had massages and wraps, manicures and pedicures. While they were there, I withdrew most of the money from our joint accounts and placed it in a couple of savings accounts under the protection of my lawyer. I checked Anna's phone one last time from the clone I had created to make sure everything planned for tonight was still happening. Looking at her calendar, I saw that she had an appointment with her gynecologist on Monday. I wondered if it might have something to do with the fact that she hadn't taken birth control for 9 days last month. I was smiling. Finally, everything was ready, and I just had to wait until tomorrow evening for the real fun to begin. "Pop!" I heard, and then I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Dad." I turned my head and saw my oldest, Roger, standing next to me. "Dad, are you feeling okay?" "I called you 5 times, Roger stated. "Oh, sorry, son." "I'm fine, just lost in thought, that's all," I replied. "Daniel says it's time for your presentation and speech," Roger told me. "Okay, I think it's time," I replied. I finished the whiskey from the top shelf and placed the glass on the small table next to me. Roger escorted me to the podium set up in front of all the assembled guests. My eldest daughter, Danielle, was waiting for me next to the podium. There was a projector broadcasting photographs of the life my wife and I had led up to this point. "Please may I have your attention?" My father has a speech and presentation prepared for my mother and everyone else on this wonderful occasion of their 25th wedding anniversary, my daughter announced. She hugged me, and we kissed each other on the cheek. She approached our family and friends and joined them, waiting for my presentation. In front of me was my beautiful wife, Anna, flanked by her parents and our children. My wife was surrounded by her friends and their spouses. Tony, Frank, and Dave now had huge smiles on their faces, knowing what was about to happen. The only thing I insisted on this evening was that there be no children, as alcohol would be served, but the real reason was the performance that was about to take place. I looked at the podium and my tablet, which was running the current slideshow. I smiled and looked at my wife. She smiled back at me, completely unaware of how her life would turn upside down in a matter of minutes. "Good evening and welcome, everyone," I began. "I'm glad that you are all here to join us for this grand celebration. Anna and I have been together for 30 years now, and for the last 25 years, we have been happily married. My eldest daughter, being very perceptive, immediately noticed that I was using the past tense in reference to her mother and our wedding, and her smile disappeared from her face. We bought a nice home and raised 4 smart, wonderful children who have bright futures ahead of them. My 3 children, along with their mother and grandparents, smiled with great joy. I can confidently say that my children are the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I am very proud of them. I smiled at my children. Danielle stared at me with a "what the hell" expression on her face. Now, Anna and I have had our little fights over the years, like any married couple. None of them brought out my wife's character better than the one we had just 3 months ago. The smile on my wife's face began to fade. Maybe she was putting 2 and 2 together. 3 months ago, I came home from work one day, and while we were having dinner, I asked Anna to take 2 weeks off from work so I could take her on a cruise to celebrate our anniversary. I was told she couldn't get time off because she had already asked for time to go to Atlantic City with Emily, Denise, and Veronica. She became furious when I asked why she did this, knowing that our 25th anniversary was this summer. That night was the first in our marriage that we intentionally slept in separate rooms in our house. Now, I will take partial responsibility for this, as I was the one who refused to sleep in the same room as Anna, but it was because I had become very suspicious of my dear wife. The smile completely disappeared from her face, as did her natural complexion. The faces of her friends behind her also darkened and turned pale. Everyone else, except Tony, Dave, and Frank, now had a confused look on their faces. I opened a file on my tablet called Scorched Earth. These are the greatest hits from the girls' trip to Atlantic City, courtesy of my private eye, I stated. No, my wife screamed. I smiled at her and pressed play. The slideshow on the wall behind me stopped, and the real show began. The room was filled with the sounds of my wife and her friends having a night with random men, which was now being broadcast on the wall. My wife fell to the floor crying. You could hear sighs from our friends and relatives. My youngest daughter was crying her eyes out as her twin brother held her in his arms. Roger, Daniel, and Aaron looked at their mother with contempt and rage in their eyes. When the cat was out of the bag and more than enough video had been shown, I stopped recording. The murmur of those present echoed throughout the hall. Please, Sean, this only happened once. Please forgive me, my wife begged, throwing her friends under the bus in a desperate attempt to be forgiven. They surprised me that weekend and made me do it. They made you do it? I asked. Yes, I swear. Anna exclaimed. I opened another file and clicked play. A video on the wall showed her and her friends flirting and dancing with their fans before taking them to their room. It certainly doesn't feel like you were forced to do anything. You could have left right away and not participated. I screamed. Please, Sean, forgive me, my wife begged again. Maybe at some point I could do that, I stated. I paused the video and opened another file called Financial Statements, which showed her secret bank account opened 4 to 2 years ago. This has been going on since your girls' nights out started 5 years ago. Why else would you need a separate and secret bank account? My wife's face was bright red, and tears continued to flow down her cheeks. It's over, she exclaimed between sobs. I swear I haven't cheated on you since the trip. Really? I declared. Yes, I swear. Anna screamed once again. I went to the tablet and opened the file Final Nail in the Coffin. This file was uploaded this morning, thanks to my senior manager, Mark, who was invited to the girls' hotel room last night. I pressed play, and a recording of my wife pleasuring Mark appeared on the wall. You lying, my daughter Danielle screamed, hitting her mother in the face. It was just in the evening, you stupid, look at your nails. Danielle grabbed her by the head and forced her to look at the pictures of the nails she had done on her 2 daughters yesterday. Given my daughter's explosive relationship with her mother, I realized that there was no need to show anything more. I closed the last file and turned off the projector and tablet. When the video show ended, it signaled the server process, who immediately walked up to my soon-to-be ex-wife and handed her the divorce papers. Anna lost it, and her parents only consoled her the way my children now comforted me. Anna's friends were also given divorce papers. After a short conversation with the children, I told them that although their mother cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, she still loved them. I told them I understood they were angry at her, and rightfully so, but they needed to be there for her too. She would need their support, even if they may not be willing to give it. I informed them about my immediate plans and that we would meet soon. I was given some space and made my final statement to Anna and everyone else. "Anna," I said, getting her attention. By now, all my personal property and things I wanted had been removed from the house, and the realtor was set to list the house and put a sign on the lawn. "Do not attempt to contact me for the next 2 weeks, as I will be on a holiday cruise to the Caribbean that I booked last month after your trip to Atlantic City. If you have any questions, please contact my attorney." After delivering the final blow to my wife, I hugged my children and left. When I entered the elevator and the door closed, I breathed a sigh of relief. As I exited the elevator and entered the hotel lobby, Shelley greeted me. We hugged, and I was overcome with joy. I could finally be with the woman I loved. "Are you ready for our cruise, my love?" I asked my beautiful red-headed goddess, who was clinging to me as if her life depended on it. "Not yet," Shelley replied. "Oh, really? Why?" I asked. "Because I need to tell you something first," she answered. "And what could it be?" I prompted. "My love, I wanted to tell you," Shelley said, pausing before speaking again. "I am pregnant." I can't say that I was shocked by this revelation since we never used protection during intimate. Apparently, Anna wasn't the only woman in my life who got pregnant that week in Atlantic City. "This is the best news I've heard all day." "I love you, Shelley," I stated. "I love you too, Sean," Shelley responded, sealing her words with a kiss. 3 months after Anna's infidelity was discovered, our divorce was final. My shark lawyer, with the help of very incriminating evidence of her infidelity, got me 75% of our assets, which amounted to over $1 million, thanks to our house, which we bought for $250,000 in the late 90s, selling for the cool sum of $1.7 million. Since all of our children were over 18, I did not have to pay child support. A week later, Shelley and I got married in a small private ceremony with my children, my parents, and Shelley's little brother. We told everyone we were waiting. Shelley's parents were excited to learn that they were going to be grandparents. Surprisingly, my children were just as excited. I didn't expect this, as I knew they were very upset that their mother was pregnant. 5 months later, Shelley and I welcomed our first child into our world. Our beautiful daughter, Mary, graced us with her presence, and 3 years later, our son, Kevin, was born. Anna, at the ripe old age of 50, gave birth to a black boy soon after her father and mother kicked her out of the house. Anna eventually remarried, and I'm glad she did. Even though she mistreated me during our marriage, she was still a good person, perhaps a little misguided, but she was an excellent mother. I was glad that she found a father for her son and a life partner. My life with Shelley was absolutely exciting. Our children were wonderful and got along well with their younger aunts and uncles. Explaining this to our children and grandchildren has been nothing short of an experience. Looking back at the love that I had and still have, I wouldn't trade it for anything. What do you think of our story today? I thought the husband did the right thing, because suspicions of infidelity are already a reason to check. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.